Here we've set up the map for the 1796 Northern Italian campaign. This is the more introductory of the many scenarios that you can play. On each campaign map, the sequence of play is displayed, starting with advancing the turn counter, moving your troops on the campaign map, resolving any battles. You then have an opportunity to force march your troops again using supply points to pay for it, resolve additional battles, resupply your French forces. Then the remainder of the turn is the enemy phase, where the enemy resolves their orders and movement, resolves any battles, and then the enemy has their own resupply phase. Let's begin by advancing the turn marker. Next, we'll move our forces on the campaign map. We can either divide our force and go into two adjacent areas, or we can simply move our entire force to one adjacent area. We'll leave a unit in Nice so as to keep a garrison there. Our regular move on the campaign map now complete, we'll resolve any combat. Anytime one of your forces ends up in the same area with an enemy force, combat must be resolved. Consult the player help sheet to check for the battle turn sequence. First, we'll roll for Fog of War. On the Fog of War chart, if your enemy has 4 to 6 supply points, add 2 to the roll and spend 2 of their supply points. If they have 7 or more supply points, spend 4 and add 4 to your roll. The enemy has 8 supply points, so we'll spend 4 of them, adding a +4 modifier to the Fog of War roll. The results on the Fog of War chart can either help you or hurt you. Rolling an 8 or more is generally bad, rolling 7 or less is generally good. We've rolled a 3. Adding 4 for the spent supply points, that gives us a result of 7. There will be 5 battle turns for this battle. In addition, we can transfer 2 of the enemy's supply points to us. That's good. Next, we check for envelopment. When you check for envelopment, add up the attack values of all of your units, and then add the attack values of all the enemy units. If you have 3 times or more as many attack value points as your enemy, he is enveloped. Then no battle would take place. You would simply remove the enemy units from the game, and you would be the victor. In this case, we don't have enough points for there to be an envelopment of this force, so a battle will take place. It's now time to move the action over to the battle mat. Just to keep our spot, we'll mark the area of the battle with the battle location marker. Next, we determine our battle plan quantities. The setup instructions on the campaign map will tell you how many battle plans each side is allowed to get. In battles where Napoleon is not present, you only receive 1 battle plan. The enemy will always receive 2 battle plans. In this battle, Napoleon will be present, so you would receive the number of battle plans equal to his command rating. So for this battle, we'll get 2 battle plans. Those are the orders that you will be issuing to your troops. Now that we've determined the number of available battle plans, we record it on the player help sheet. Now we have an opportunity to buy additional French battle plans. I think we'll go ahead and use some of those supply points we stole from the enemy on our Fog of War roll and buy an additional battle plan for ourselves. This will give us a bit more of an edge during the battle. Next, we can select insight counters. Insight counters are special abilities that you can purchase for any battle in which Napoleon is present. You do this by spending one of your available battle plans for each insight you decide to use in the upcoming battle. Just for the purpose of this demonstration, we'll go ahead and select the sweep insight for this coming battle. Since we decided to select an insight for this battle, we pay for it by reducing our number of available battle plans back to 2. Next, we'll be placing first the French and then the enemy forces on the battle mat. Place your French forces in any manner you see fit on the battle mat, keeping in mind the unit limits for each region. At the beginning of a battle, French units can be placed in either the approach area or the reserve area. When placing your units, you can place them either in column formation or you can place them in line formation. There are differences when it comes to acting out the orders you've issued. Attack orders will generally be easier when your units are in line. Movement type orders are generally easier when your units are in column. Since we intend to attempt to use this sweep insight, our cavalry units must be placed in the reserve region. Napoleon, if he's present, goes down here in the corner. Enemy units are distributed at random, with up to 4 going in the enemy approach area, and any remaining units placed in the reserve area. With the pre-battle steps completed, next we move on to the battle steps, beginning with insight activation. This is where you attempt to use the special ability that you've purchased with a battle plan when Napoleon is present. In order to activate this particular insight, we must roll Napoleon's command rating +1 or less. So we must roll a 3 or less in order to activate this insight. We've rolled a 6, failing to activate the insight. Now pound your fist on the table in frustration. Next, we will select and place our battle plans. Again, these are the orders that we'll be issuing to our troops. We can select up to 2 battle plans. Here are the orders that we have to choose from. Our battle plans, our orders that we'll be issuing to our troops. Some of them have conditions that must be met prior to the performance of the battle order. For example, this battle order would only be activated if the enemy is 2 spaces away from the unit executing the order. Battle orders are performed in order of their action. So the unit that performs, for example, this engage, if it's in column, it does not need to roll to activate. The unit would advance, then form a line, and then attack. We're going to choose the flank and engage battle plans for this round of combat. We'll assign the flank battle order to Agereau's unit. We'll assign the engage battle order to Serrier's unit. Units that were not assigned a special battle order will use default battle orders that are printed on the battle mat when it's their turn to act. Next, we draw and assign enemy battle plans. We'll be drawing 2 for the enemy forces. Draw and assign enemy battle plans in order of unit skill level. Here we've got 3 line units and 2 corps units. The line units would take priority in receiving battle plans. If you have more than 1 unit of the same skill level, you can choose which one will receive the next battle plan. Our first battle plan, we'll go ahead and give it to this guy. Draw out of a cup, and he will receive the forward battle plan. The second battle plan will go to this guy, and he will receive the assault battle plan. Like our French forces, enemy units that don't receive a battle plan will execute a default battle plan printed on the map when it's their turn to act. Next up in the battle turn sequence, we will resolve enemy battle plans first, followed by resolving our French battle plans. Battle plans are always carried out from the frontmost rank to the rear. First, act out the battle plans for units with special battle plans. Assault. If cavalry, no roll. Well, this is not cavalry, this is an infantry. So, what that means is he has to roll a 6 or less in order to activate. This is his activation number. We rolled a 4, so this unit will activate. We now perform the actions in order. First, he will advance. If the enemy is at a range of 0 or 1, form a line. Well, there's no enemies at 1, and there's no enemies at 0 range, so that action is skipped. Next, he's ordered to attack. Well, there's no one to attack, so that action will be skipped as well. This unit is now finished performing his battle order. These units will perform a default order, and it will be advance. Since the enemy is at a range of 2 or more, they will automatically get the advance order. If in column, no roll. So no activation number roll will be necessary. Those 3 units will simply advance. Now, it's time for the unit in the reserve region to perform his battle order. Forward. If in column, no activation roll. His first action will be to advance. If there is an enemy at a range of 1, form a line. There is not. So then move to the next action, which is attack, and again, there's no one to attack. So this unit has now completed executing its orders for this battle turn. Next up, it's our turn for our French boys to have a crack at the enemy. We'll start with Agero's unit here, executing this flank order. The condition for this order to be activated requires enemy units to be at a range of 2, which they are. So, if in column, no activation roll is necessary. The first action we have to perform is to advance our unit. Then, perform another advance action, moving Agero into the enemy formation. Now, the enemy units will have to make a shock check. Since they are in column formation instead of line, units will automatically fail their shock check. If they had been in line formation, then they would have an opportunity to roll equal to or less than their attack value in order to avoid taking shock damage. But since they're in column, they will auto-fail, again going from least skilled units to best. Assign hits accordingly. When a unit fails a shock check, they must take a hit and then retreat one region. The final order on Agero's battle order is to attack. He will now perform a melee attack on the weakest enemy unit in this region. Since it's melee, he'll get a +3/+3 modifier to his attack roll. So normally with an attack roll you'd have to roll the attack value or less. In this case we would have to roll 11 or less, or we would automatically be successful in our attack. So we would go ahead and roll, and we rolled an 8. Well, we didn't get the additional +3 bonus superscript, which I'll explain when we get to cavalry. But he did roll the 8, so another enemy unit would take a hit. Agero has now finished carrying out his assigned orders. Next, we move on to Surier's unit. If in column, no activation roll necessary. Advance. There's no enemies in this region, so there will be no shock check. Form a line. And then attack with a +1/+1. So now Surier needs to roll 8 or less instead of 7 or less. We've rolled a 4. So this enemy unit is now destroyed and removed from the map. Finally, our remaining French units will execute one of the default orders. We'll go ahead and have them execute a march order. If in column, no activation roll is necessary. Cavalry would advance. Then there is another regular advance order, which applies to infantry. Each one will perform the march order. Our cavalry, they're not going to do anything. We want to leave them in the reserve so that they can try again for their sweep insight. With all enemy and French battle plans resolved, we now move on to the next step in the battle turn sequence, which is the route check. When performing the route check, add up the attack value for all enemy units and then all of your units. And if you have 3 times the attack value points of the enemy, it would be a rout. The enemy would then automatically perform the retreat battle order, and you would continue. They would retreat, you would pursue, attempting to destroy them before they leave the battle map. In this case, there is no route possible yet. And then finally, we would advance the battle turn counter. After you advance the battle turn counter, proceed back to the top of the battle turn list and start again from the beginning. Let's go ahead and see how that insight works, just so you can see it, how it works. We start anew at the insight activation phase, and what do you know? We've rolled a 2, which meets the requirement of rolling 3 or less to activate the sweep insight. So let's see how that works. We take our cavalry in reserve and have those cavalry conduct 3 attacks each against enemy units from the rear ranks forward. So a quick note about cavalry. You'll see a smaller number 4 above Stengel's attack value of 8. That little 4 superscript means, let's say if Stengel rolls a 7 on one of his attack rolls, he would only score 1 hit. But if he rolls a 4 or less, he would actually get 2 hits for 1 roll. And if he were to score 2 hits, this unit would be destroyed. This unit would be flipped to its reduced side. So to finish resolving the sweep insight, we would then roll 2 more attacks for Stengel, then 3 attacks for Kilmaine. And for him, he would hit on a 6 or less, and he would dole out 2 hits for rolling a 3 or less. So as you can see, that sweep insight can be particularly devastating. Once you've finished performing that insight, you'll remove the 2 cavalry units from the battle mat and return them to the campaign map in the area of the battle. They'll no longer take part in the fighting for this battle. So continue conducting battle turns, going down the list of the steps until one side of the other or the other is defeated, until one side or the other routs, or until the battle turn track finally runs out to the withdrawal space. In which case, if neither side has emerged victorious, roll on the withdrawal table. The 2 sides may rejoin the battle anew with a brand new fog of war turn. The enemy force may retreat to an adjacent area. The French force may retreat to an adjacent area, or both forces may encamp in the same area until the next turn. Once the battle's been completed, return your forces to the map from the area they came from and remove the battle location marker. You're now ready to move on with the turn. Next up is the forced march segment of the turn. You can move to an additional adjacent area, spending 1 supply point for each unit that you move. We just got done with a pretty hefty battle. We'll let our boys take a rest and move on to the French resupply segment. For this particular campaign, you will automatically gain 3 supply points each turn, plus an additional 3 supply points for each French-held city. So for this turn, we earned an additional 6 supply points. During the resupply phase, you can spend your supply points either repurchasing previously destroyed units, or you can purchase reinforcements, artillery, fortifications, or garrisons for your captured areas. The cost in supply points would be equal to the attack value of whichever unit you're looking at purchasing. Next, we'll move on to the enemy orders phase. The enemy orders chart will instruct you whether or not to divide up large groups of enemy forces to roll for separately, and it will also instruct you whether or not to spend supply points to modify the die roll for the enemy. Here we can see roll for groups of 3 forces in the same area. We have a very large stack of Austrian units here in Genoa. So we've taken that large stack and divided them into groups of 3 where possible, with the 1 odd unit off by itself. We'll now make a separate enemy orders roll for each one of these stacks. So they might be ordered to advance, depending on your roll, toward the nearest enemy held objective. They may be ordered to hold their position, move into a random adjacent area, move toward the nearest French-held objective, advance on the closest French force, advance up to 2 spaces areas toward a French-held objective, or advance up to 2 areas toward the nearest French force. Once all enemy units have rolled for their orders and moved, you'll move on to the Resolve Battles segment. Any area where an enemy unit has moved into the same area as a French unit, resolve battles according to the previously described battle turn sequence. Finally, move on to the enemy resupply phase. The enemy resupply phase can change depending on the campaign, but each campaign map will describe the resupply phase for the enemy. In this case, roll a die for each enemy held city. Depending on the result, it can receive a fortification or a garrison, or they may receive a random reinforcement drawn out of the enemy reinforcements cup, or the enemy may gain additional supply points. And that's it. Go back to the top, advance the turn counter, and begin the next turn new, and continue your conquest. That's going to do it for this edition of Nuts and Bolts for Field Commander Napoleon. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Until next time, happy gaming.